The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Valdoria Palace as Queen Victoria made her way through the east wing corridors. Her silk slippers whispered against the cold stone as she moved with purpose toward the private chambers that had remained sealed for 3 years. Today marked the 3rd anniversary of Queen Isabella's death, and Victoria had decided it was finally time to sort through the belongings of her husband's first wife. King Edmund had been reluctant to disturb Isabella's rooms, keeping them as a shrine to her memory. But Victoria felt it was unhealthy for the kingdom and their marriage to continue living in the shadow of a ghost. She had convinced Edmund just yesterday that it was time to move forward, to pack away the past and make room for their future together. Victoria pushed open the heavy oak doors and stepped into what had once been the most beautiful suite in the palace. Dust particles danced in the morning light streaming through tall windows. Everything remained exactly as Isabella had left it, her books still open on the reading table, her jewelry box sitting on the vanity, her perfume bottles arranged just so. The new queen had always felt intimidated by Isabella's memory. The people still spoke of her with reverence, calling her the people's queen. She had been beloved for her charity work, her gentle nature, and her stunning beauty. Victoria knew she could never fill those shoes, but she was determined to carve out her own place in the kingdom's history. As Victoria began opening drawers and sorting through clothes, she tried not to think about how different she and Isabella had been. Where Isabella was blonde and petite, Victoria was brunette and tall. Where Isabella had been soft-spoken and charitable, Victoria was more direct and politically minded. The people had accepted her as queen, but she always sensed they were comparing her to their beloved Isabella. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened Isabella's jewelry box. Inside lay a stunning collection of gems and precious metals, each piece more beautiful than the last. But it was the necklace at the very bottom that took her breath away. The sapphire of Valdoria was legendary, a massive blue stone surrounded by diamonds set in platinum. It had been passed down through generations of queens, and Isabella had worn it on all the most important state occasions. Victoria lifted the necklace carefully, feeling its weight in her hands. The sapphire caught the morning light and seemed to glow from within. This was more than just jewelry. It was a symbol of royal power and legitimacy. The queen who wore the sapphire of Valdoria was the true queen of the kingdom. As she held the necklace up to the light, Victoria made a decision that would change everything. She would claim this necklace as her own. After all, she was the current queen. Edmund was her husband now. The royal jewels should belong to her, not sit collecting dust in a dead woman's jewelry box. Victoria fastened the necklace around her neck and looked at herself in Isabella's mirror. The sapphire rested perfectly in the hollow of her throat, and for the first time since becoming queen, she felt truly royal. This necklace would cement her position and show the people that she was not living in Isabella's shadow. She was the queen now. She spent the next hour packing away Isabella's other belongings, but she kept the necklace on. When servants came to help move boxes, they stared in shock at seeing their new queen wearing Isabella's most precious possession. Word spread quickly through the palace corridors. Queen Victoria had claimed the sapphire of Valdoria. By afternoon, the news had reached Princess Elena, Isabella's daughter, from her previous marriage to a duke. Elena was now 18 and had been living quietly in the palace's north wing since her stepfather had married Victoria. She had always been a sweet, gentle girl who reminded everyone of her beloved mother. Elena rushed to Victoria's chambers, her heart pounding with disbelief. She found the new queen sitting at her desk, still wearing the sapphire necklace while reviewing state papers. "Your Majesty," Elena said, trying to keep her voice steady, "I heard that you have my mother's necklace." Victoria looked up coolly. "This necklace belongs to the current queen of Valdoria. That would be me." "But it was my mother's most treasured possession," Elena said, her eyes filling with tears. "She wore it when she married my father, and when she married King Edmund. She told me it would be mine one day. Your mother is gone, Elena, Victoria said, not unkindly but firmly. I am sorry for your loss, but I am the queen now. The royal jewels belong to the crown, not to individuals. Elena felt as if she had been slapped. The necklace had been promised to her since childhood. Isabella had often told her the stories behind each jewel in the collection, but the sapphire had always been special. It had been in the royal family for over 200 years, and Isabella had promised that Elena would wear it at her own wedding one day. Please, Elena whispered. It's all I have left of her. Victoria softened slightly at the girl's obvious pain, but she did not remove the necklace. You have many beautiful memories of your mother. That should be enough. Elena left the chamber in tears, but her sadness quickly turned to determination. She would not let Victoria simply take what belonged to her family. The necklace was more than just jewelry. It was her birthright, her connection to her mother, and her claim to royal status. That evening, Elena requested an audience with King Edmund. She found him in his study, looking tired and aged. The past 3 years had been difficult for him as he tried to balance honoring Isabella's memory while building a new life with Victoria. Father, Elena began carefully. Edmund had always insisted she call him father, even though he was technically her stepfather. I need to speak with you about Mother's necklace. Edmund looked up from his papers, already sensing trouble. What about it? Victoria has taken it. She's wearing it as if it belongs to her. Edmund rubbed his temples wearily. The royal jewels do belong to the current queen, Elena. You know that. But Mother promised it to me, Elena said, fighting back tears. She said it would be mine when I married. It's been in our family for generations. It's been in the royal family for generations, Edmund corrected gently. Your mother was part of that family, and now Victoria is too. Elena felt her heart breaking. Even Edmund, who had loved her mother so deeply, was not going to fight for Isabella's memory. So Victoria can just take everything that was Mother's, as if she never existed? That's not what this is about, Edmund said, but his voice lacked conviction. He knew Victoria had been eager to remove all traces of Isabella from their daily life, and perhaps he had been too willing to let her. Isn't it? Elena challenged. First she redecorated Mother's sitting room, then she gave away Mother's horses. Now she's wearing Mother's jewelry. What's next? Edmund was quiet for a long moment. He loved Victoria, but he also felt a deep responsibility to preserve Isabella's memory for Elena. The girl had lost so much already, her birth father when she was young, then her beloved mother. The necklace was indeed one of the few tangible connections she had left. I'll speak with Victoria, he said finally. But when Edmund approached his wife later that evening, Victoria was ready for him. She was sitting at her vanity, the sapphire necklace glowing against her skin as she brushed her long, dark hair. Elena came to see you, Victoria said, before he could speak. Yes, she did. She's quite upset about the necklace. Victoria set down her brush and turned to face him. Edmund, we agreed that it was time to move forward. We cannot keep living in the past. That girl needs to accept that her mother is gone and that I am your wife now. The necklace was promised to her, Edmund said quietly. By a dead woman, Victoria replied sharply. I am the living queen. The jewels belong to me. Edmund looked at his wife, so different from gentle Isabella. Victoria was beautiful in her own way, but there was a hardness to her that Isabella had never possessed. Still, he loved her, and he understood her desire to establish herself as the true queen. Perhaps we could find a compromise, he suggested. Elena could wear it at her wedding, and then it would return to the crown. Victoria's eyes flashed with anger. Absolutely not. If we start making exceptions and promises, where does it end? Elena is not even your biological daughter. She has no claim to the royal jewels. The words hung in the air like poison. Edmund had always treated Elena as his own daughter, and hearing Victoria dismiss the girl so coldly stirred something protective in him. She may not be my biological daughter, but she is Isabella's daughter, and Isabella was the rightful queen of Valdoria. Was being the important phrase, Victoria said, rising from her chair. The necklace caught the lamplight as she moved. I am the rightful queen now. Edmund looked at his wife wearing his first wife's most precious possession, and for the first time, he felt truly conflicted. Victoria had been so understanding during their courtship about his grief over Isabella. She had promised to honor his first wife's memory while building their own life together, but now it seemed she was intent on erasing Isabella entirely. I think you should give the necklace to Elena, he said quietly. Victoria stared at him in shock. You're choosing a dead woman and her daughter over your living wife? I'm trying to do what's right for everyone. What's right is for the current queen to wear the queen's jewels, Victoria said firmly. I will not be pushed aside for the memory of your first wife. I've lived in her shadow long enough. The argument continued late into the night, but Victoria would not be swayed. She had claimed the necklace, and she intended to keep it. Edmund finally went to bed frustrated and torn between loyalty to his current wife and his love for his stepdaughter. Meanwhile, in her chambers, Elena sat writing letters by candlelight. She wrote to her maternal grandmother, the Dowager Duchess of Ashford, explaining what had happened. She wrote to her godfather, the Duke of Westmere, asking for advice. And she wrote to her best friend, Lady Catherine, pouring out her heartbreak and rage. The palace was buzzing with tension. Servants whispered in corners about the queen wearing dead Isabella's necklace. Some supported Victoria's right to the crown jewels, while others felt she was being disrespectful to Isabella's memory. The kitchen staff, who had all adored Isabella, were particularly upset. Lady Margaret, who had served as Isabella's lady-in-waiting and now served Elena, was furious. She had been present when Isabella promised the necklace to Elena multiple times. She knew how much the piece meant to the girl, not just as jewelry, but as a connection to her mother's love. It's not right, Lady Margaret told Elena that night as she helped her prepare for bed. Your mother wore that necklace when she was presented to society as a duchess. She wore it at her first wedding and her second. It should be yours. But what can I do? Elena asked sadly. Victoria is the queen, and she has father's support. Does she really? Lady Margaret asked. I saw King Edmund's face today. He looked troubled. Elena wanted to believe that Edmund would change his mind and support her, but she feared Victoria's influence over him was too strong. The new queen was beautiful and clever, and she knew exactly how to manage men. Elena was just a young girl with no real power or influence. As the days passed, the tension in the palace grew. Victoria wore the sapphire necklace to a state dinner, causing shocked whispers among the foreign diplomats who remembered Isabella wearing it. She wore it to a charity gala, where several of Isabella's former friends pointedly avoided speaking to her. The people of Valdoria began to take sides. Those who had loved Isabella felt Victoria was being disrespectful and greedy. Those who supported the new queen believed she had every right to wear the royal jewels. The kingdom that had been united in grief over Isabella's death was now divided over her memory. Elena tried to go about her daily routine, but everywhere she went, she saw people staring at her with pity or curiosity. She knew they were all talking about the necklace, about her loss, about her powerlessness. She began to spend more time alone in her chambers, avoiding the public areas of the palace where she might encounter Victoria wearing her mother's jewelry. 2 weeks after Victoria had claimed the necklace, Elena received a letter that changed everything. It was from her maternal grandmother, the Dowager Duchess of Ashford, and it contained information that would shake the very foundations of the palace. The letter revealed that the sapphire of Valdoria had not always been a crown jewel. It had originally belonged to the Ashford family and had been brought to the royal family when Isabella's great-grandmother married a prince 2 centuries ago. According to family documents that the Dowager Duchess had uncovered, the necklace was supposed to pass down through the female line of the Ashford family, not remain with the crown. Elena read the letter 3 times, hardly daring to believe it. If this was true, then the necklace legally belonged to her, not to Victoria. She was Isabella's daughter and the last of the direct Ashford female line. The necklace was her birthright by blood, not just by promise. With shaking hands, Elena wrote back to her grandmother, asking for copies of all the relevant documents. She also wrote to the royal historian, requesting information about the necklace's origins. If she was going to challenge Victoria's claim, she needed to be absolutely certain of her facts. While Elena waited for responses to her letters, Victoria continued to wear the necklace at every possible opportunity. She seemed to take pleasure in displaying it, as if she were proving her dominance over Isabella's memory. The more Elena saw her wearing it, the more determined she became to fight for what was rightfully hers. The palace staff had begun to choose sides more openly. The older servants, who had known and loved Isabella, were sympathetic to Elena's plight. The newer staff, hired since Victoria became queen, were more loyal to the current royal couple. The division was creating an uncomfortable atmosphere throughout the palace. King Edmund found himself caught in the middle of increasingly hostile camps. Victoria made it clear that she expected his full support in maintaining her right to wear the necklace. Elena, meanwhile, looked at him with such sad disappointment that it broke his heart. He began to spend more time away from the palace, hunting or visiting other estates, trying to escape the tension at home. One evening, as Elena sat in the palace gardens watching the sunset, she made a decision that would change everything. She would not simply accept Victoria's theft of her inheritance. She would fight for the necklace, not just for herself, but for her mother's memory and for what was right. Elena had been raised as a proper royal lady, taught to be gentle and accommodating. But she had also inherited her mother's strength and her determination to protect what mattered. The sapphire of Valdoria mattered. It was the last tangible piece of her mother's love, and she would not let Victoria take that away from her. As she sat in the garden where her mother used to walk, Elena began to plan her strategy. She would gather evidence about the necklace's true ownership. She would rally support among those who had loved Isabella, and if necessary, she would publicly challenge Victoria's right to wear the family jewel. The gentle princess that everyone remembered was about to show that she had inherited more than just her mother's beauty. She had inherited Isabella's courage as well, and she was prepared to use it to fight for what belonged to her family. The stage was set for a confrontation that would rock the palace to its foundations and force King Edmund to choose between his past and his present, between his guilt and his love, between his daughter and his wife. The sapphire of Valdoria had become more than just a necklace. It was now a symbol of power, legitimacy, and the right to claim Isabella's legacy. As Elena rose from the garden bench and walked back toward the palace, the sapphire necklace gleamed around Victoria's neck in a window high above. Neither woman knew that their battle was about to escalate far beyond what either had imagined, and that the intervention that would come would shock not just them, but the entire kingdom. 3 days later, Elena received the documents that would change everything. The package from her grandmother arrived by special courier, sealed with the Ashford family crest. Inside were copies of old contracts, marriage agreements, and family records dating back 200 years. Elena's hands trembled as she read through the papers with Lady Margaret by her side. The evidence was clear and undeniable. When Lady Catherine Ashford married Prince Frederick of Valdoria in 1823, the marriage contract specifically stated that the sapphire of Valdoria would remain in the Ashford family line, passing from mother to daughter. It was not to become crown property, but rather a family heirloom that traveled with the Ashford women. "Look here," Lady Margaret pointed to a particular passage. "It says quite clearly that the necklace shall pass to the eldest daughter of the Ashford line, and if there is no daughter, then to the next female heir of the bloodline." Elena felt her heart racing as she read the legal language. According to these documents, the necklace had never legally belonged to the crown. It had been worn by queens because they happened to be Ashford descendants, but ownership had always remained with the family. Isabella had been the rightful owner, and now Elena was. "We need to show this to the royal historian immediately," Elena said, gathering the papers carefully, "and to the palace lawyers." Sir William Hartwell, the elderly royal historian, examined the documents with great interest. He had served the palace for over 40 years and remembered Isabella's wedding day when she wore the sapphire necklace for the first time as queen. He had always wondered about its history. "These documents appear to be authentic," he said after a thorough examination. "The seals are correct, the paper aging is consistent with the dates, and I recognize several of the signatures from other historical records. Princess Elena, if these are genuine, then you are the rightful owner of the sapphire of Valdoria." Elena felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. She was right about the necklace, but now she faced the daunting task of confronting Queen Victoria and potentially creating a scandal that could damage the royal family's reputation. Sir William agreed to research the palace records to confirm the document's authenticity. Within 2 days, he had found corresponding entries in the royal archives that supported Elena's claim. The necklace had indeed been incorrectly classified as crown property for decades, when it should have been listed as an Ashford family possession. Meanwhile, Victoria continued to wear the necklace at public events, unaware that her claim was being challenged. She had grown increasingly confident in her position as queen, and the sapphire had become her signature piece. Photographers always captured her wearing it, and fashion magazines wrote about how stunning she looked with the legendary gem. Elena knew she had to act carefully. A direct confrontation with Victoria could backfire and make her look like a bitter stepdaughter trying to cause trouble. Instead, she decided to first approach Edmund with the evidence, hoping he would see reason and convince Victoria to return the necklace voluntarily. She requested a private audience with her stepfather, bringing Sir William and the documents with her. Edmund listened in stunned silence as the historian explained the legal implications of the marriage contracts and family records. "Are you saying that Victoria has no legal right to wear that necklace?" Edmund asked, his face pale. "I'm afraid that's exactly what we're saying, Your Majesty," Sir William replied. "The necklace belongs to Princess Elena by right of inheritance through the Ashford family line." Edmund rubbed his forehead wearily. He had hoped this dispute would fade away, but now it was becoming a serious legal matter. "What do you want me to do, Elena?" "I want you to ask Victoria to return what belongs to me," Elena said quietly. "I don't want to cause a scandal, but I cannot let her keep something that was stolen from my family." "Stolen is a strong word," Edmund said defensively. "What else would you call taking something that doesn't belong to you?" Elena asked, her composure beginning to crack. "She went into my mother's room, took her most precious possession, and claimed it as her own. If that isn't theft, I don't know what is." Edmund knew Elena was right, but he also knew how Victoria would react to being told she had to give up the necklace. His wife had made it clear that she saw the sapphire as a symbol of her authority and legitimacy as queen. Asking her to return it would be like asking her to admit she was a lesser queen than Isabella. "Let me speak with her," Edmund said finally, "but I cannot guarantee she will agree." That evening, Edmund approached Victoria in her sitting room. She was reviewing guest lists for an upcoming state banquet, the sapphire necklace catching the lamplight as she moved. Edmund's heart sank as he realized how attached she had become to wearing it. Victoria, we need to discuss the necklace, he began carefully. Victoria looked up with immediate suspicion. Has Elena been complaining again? She's discovered some documents about the necklace's ownership, legal documents that suggest it belongs to her family, not to the crown. Victoria set down her pen and stared at him. What kind of documents? Edmund explained about the marriage contracts and the historian's research. As he spoke, Victoria's expression grew colder and more determined. I don't care what some dusty old papers say, she said when he finished. I am the Queen of Valdoria. The royal jewels belong to me. If Elena wants jewelry, she can buy her own. Victoria, these aren't just dusty old papers. They're legal contracts that establish ownership. If this becomes a court matter, you could be forced to return the necklace anyway. Court matter? Victoria laughed harshly. You think that girl has the courage to take the Queen of Valdoria to court? She can barely speak up for herself at dinner. Edmund was taken aback by his wife's dismissive tone. Elena is showing remarkable courage in pursuing this, and she has every right to fight for what belongs to her. She has no rights that I don't grant her, Victoria snapped. She's living in this palace by our generosity. She should be grateful, not making demands. She's my daughter, Edmund said firmly. And she was Isabella's daughter. She deserves to be treated with respect. Victoria stood up abruptly, the necklace swaying with her movement. There it is, Isabella again. Everything always comes back to your precious dead wife. When are you going to accept that she's gone and I'm here? This isn't about choosing between you and Isabella, Edmund said, though he was beginning to wonder if that's exactly what it was. This is about doing what's legally and morally right. What's right is supporting your current wife instead of a girl who isn't even your real daughter, Victoria said cruelly. The words hit Edmund like a physical blow. He had never heard Victoria speak so harshly about Elena before. She is my real daughter in every way that matters. I've raised her since she was 8 years old. But she's not your blood, Victoria pressed. She's a reminder of Isabella's first marriage, of her life before you. Why are you so determined to preserve that? Edmund stared at his wife, seeing clearly for the first time how deep her resentment of Isabella's memory truly ran. Because it's part of who Elena is, and Elena matters to me. More than I do, apparently, Victoria said, turning away from him. The conversation ended in a stalemate, with Victoria refusing to consider returning the necklace and Edmund feeling more conflicted than ever. He loved his wife, but he was beginning to see a side of her that troubled him deeply. Word of the legal documents began to spread through the palace, despite Elena's efforts to keep the matter private. Servants who had access to the royal historian's office spoke in whispers about ancient contracts and rightful ownership. The story grew more dramatic with each telling. The palace staff became even more divided. Those who had loved Isabella were thrilled that Elena might reclaim her mother's necklace. They began to treat the young princess with extra deference and support, bringing her special treats from the kitchen and offering words of encouragement. The servants who were loyal to Victoria, however, saw Elena's claim as an attack on their queen's authority. They began to watch Elena suspiciously and report her activities to Victoria's lady-in-waiting. Victoria herself became increasingly defiant. Rather than hiding the necklace while the legal questions were resolved, she wore it even more frequently. She had it photographed for official portraits and made sure to display it prominently at every public appearance. She's practically flaunting it now, Lady Margaret observed as they watched Victoria greeting foreign ambassadors in the throne room. It's as if she's trying to provoke Elena into a public confrontation. Elena was indeed feeling provoked, but she was determined to handle the situation with dignity. She had been raised to believe in proper behavior and royal protocol, even in difficult circumstances. However, her patience was being severely tested. The breaking point came during a state dinner honoring visiting dignitaries from neighboring kingdoms. Elena was required to attend as a member of the royal family, sitting at the high table where everyone could see her. Victoria swept into the dining hall, wearing an elaborate gown that perfectly showcased the sapphire necklace. As Victoria took her seat next to Edmund, Elena felt a surge of anger unlike anything she had ever experienced. Her mother's necklace was being displayed like a trophy, worn by a woman who had no right to it. The sapphire caught the candlelight from the chandeliers, seeming to mock Elena with its beauty. During the dinner, several of the visiting dignitaries complimented Victoria on the stunning necklace. Each compliment felt like a knife in Elena's heart. She watched Victoria smile graciously and accept praise for wearing stolen jewelry, and Elena's resolve hardened into steel. After the dinner, as guests moved to the ballroom for dancing, Elena made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She approached Victoria directly in front of a group of foreign nobles and palace courtiers. "Your Majesty," Elena said clearly, her voice carrying across the room, "I believe you're wearing something that belongs to me." The ballroom fell silent. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as people turned to stare at the young princess confronting the queen. Victoria's face flushed with anger and embarrassment at being challenged so publicly. "I'm wearing the royal jewels, as is my right as queen," Victoria replied, her voice tight with fury. "Actually, the sapphire of Valdoria is not a royal jewel," Elena said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "It's an Ashford family heirloom that my mother wore by right of inheritance. As her daughter and the last of the Ashford line, it belongs to me." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the assembled crowd. Foreign dignitaries looked confused and fascinated by the drama unfolding before them. Palace courtiers exchanged meaningful glances, realizing they were witnessing a moment that would be talked about for years. Victoria's hand instinctively went to the necklace as if to protect it. "You have no proof of these wild claims." "I have marriage contracts, family records, and confirmation from the royal historian," Elena replied calmly. "The documentation is quite clear." The crowd pressed closer, eager to hear every word. This was better entertainment than any opera or theater performance. A young princess was publicly challenging the queen's right to wear the legendary sapphire of Valdoria. Victoria realized she was trapped in a situation that could only end badly for her. If she backed down publicly, she would look weak and illegitimate. If she refused to acknowledge Elena's claim, she would look like a thief clinging to stolen goods. "This is neither the time nor the place for such discussions," Victoria said, trying to regain control of the situation. "When would be the appropriate time?" Elena asked. "I've tried to handle this privately, but you've refused to even consider returning what you know doesn't belong to you." King Edmund, who had been watching from across the room, realized he had to intervene before the situation escalated further. He strode across the ballroom, his face grim with determination. "That's enough," he said firmly, his voice carrying the authority of absolute royal power. "Both of you." The crowd fell silent, sensing that the king was about to make a pronouncement that would resolve the dispute. Elena and Victoria both turned to look at him, their faces tense with anticipation. Edmund looked at his wife wearing the sapphire necklace, then at his stepdaughter standing proud and defiant despite her youth. He thought about Isabella, about promises made and kept, about justice and family loyalty. Most importantly, he thought about what kind of king he wanted to be remembered as. "Victoria," he said quietly, but clearly enough for everyone to hear, "please remove the necklace." The ballroom erupted in shocked whispers. Victoria stared at her husband in disbelief, her hand clutching the sapphire as if it could anchor her to her position. "Edmund, you cannot be serious," she whispered. "I am completely serious," he replied, The necklace belongs to Elena, and it's time to return it to its rightful owner. Victoria's face went white, then red with humiliation and rage. She had been publicly overruled by her own husband in front of the entire court and foreign dignitaries. Her authority as queen had been undermined in the most public way possible. With shaking hands, Victoria reached behind her neck to unclasp the necklace. The silence in the ballroom was deafening as she removed the sapphire of Valdoria and held it out toward Elena. Her eyes burned with a mixture of hatred and betrayal. Elena stepped forward and gently took the necklace from Victoria's hands. The sapphire felt warm from being worn, and Elena could smell traces of Victoria's perfume on the chain. As she held her mother's most precious possession for the first time in 3 years, tears began to flow down her cheeks. "Thank you," Elena whispered to Edmund, her voice breaking with emotion. Edmund nodded, then addressed the assembled crowd with royal authority. "The evening's entertainment is concluded. Please return to your chambers." As the guests dispersed, buzzing with excitement over what they had witnessed, Victoria stood alone in the center of the ballroom. Her neck felt strangely bare without the weight of the sapphire, and she realized that more than just a necklace had been taken from her tonight. Her authority, her pride, and her marriage had all been damaged, perhaps beyond repair. Elena clutched the necklace to her chest as she hurried from the ballroom, Lady Margaret close behind her. In her chambers, she carefully fastened her mother's necklace around her neck and looked at herself in the mirror. The sapphire seemed to glow with its own inner light, and for the first time since Isabella's death, Elena felt truly connected to her mother's memory. But even in her moment of victory, Elena knew that the battle was far from over. Victoria's humiliation would not be easily forgotten or forgiven. The queen would find ways to make Elena pay for this public defeat, and the palace would never be the same. The intervention had shocked everyone present, but the consequences were only beginning to unfold. King Edmund had chosen to support justice over political convenience, but he had also chosen his stepdaughter over his wife. That decision would reshape the royal family and the kingdom in ways no one could yet imagine. As Elena fell asleep that night with her mother's necklace safely in its jewelry box beside her bed, she could not know that the morning would bring new challenges, and that Victoria's anger would lead to actions that would threaten not just Elena's happiness, but her very place in the royal family. The morning after the confrontation in the ballroom brought no peace to Valdoria Palace. Word of the dramatic scene had spread beyond the palace walls, and by dawn, newspaper reporters had gathered at the gates, eager for details about the dispute between the queen and princess over the legendary sapphire necklace. Elena woke to find Lady Margaret pacing nervously in her sitting room, holding several newspapers that had somehow managed to print early editions about the previous night's events. "Princess, you need to see these," Lady Margaret said, her voice tight with worry. Elena read the headlines with growing alarm. "Royal family torn apart by jewel dispute," declared one paper. "Queen humiliated as king sides with stepdaughter," announced another. The most damaging headline read, "Palace sources reveal deep division between royal couple." The articles were filled with speculation and half-truths, but they captured the essence of what had happened. Victoria had been publicly overruled by her husband, Elena had successfully claimed her inheritance, and the royal family was in crisis. Some papers praised Edmund for standing up for justice, while others criticized him for embarrassing his wife in front of foreign dignitaries. "How did they get information so quickly?" Elena asked, though she suspected the answer. "Palace staff," Lady Margaret confirmed grimly. "People talk, especially when something this dramatic happens. By tonight, the story will be in newspapers across the continent." Elena felt sick to her stomach. She had wanted to reclaim her mother's necklace, but she hadn't intended to create a scandal that would damage the royal family's reputation. Now the whole kingdom would know about their private disputes, and foreign courts would be gossiping about Valdoria's internal conflicts. Meanwhile, in the royal chambers, Victoria was in a fury unlike anything her personal servants had ever witnessed. She had dismissed her ladies-in-waiting and was pacing the room like a caged animal, her face flushed with rage and humiliation. Edmund entered quietly, knowing he had to face his wife's anger. Victoria whirled around when she heard the door open, her eyes blazing with betrayal. "How could you?" she screamed at him. "How could you humiliate me like that in front of everyone?" "I was trying to do what was right," Edmund said calmly, though his heart was pounding. "Right?" Victoria laughed bitterly. "What's right is supporting your wife, not some girl who isn't even your real daughter. What's right is maintaining the dignity and authority of the crown." "Elena is my real daughter," Edmund said firmly, "and the necklace belonged to her. You knew that." Victoria's face twisted with rage. "I knew no such thing. I am the Queen of Valdoria, and the royal jewels belong to me. You've made me look like a fool and a thief." "You made yourself look like that by refusing to return something that didn't belong to you," Edmund replied, his own patience wearing thin. Victoria stared at him with such hatred that he barely recognized the woman he had married. "You have destroyed my reputation and my authority as queen. The newspapers are already calling me a laughingstock. Foreign courts will think I'm weak and illegitimate." "Then perhaps you should have considered that before you took something that wasn't yours," Edmund said quietly. The words hung in the air between them like a sword. Victoria realized that her husband was not going to apologize or try to make amends. He truly believed she had been wrong, and he had chosen Elena over her. "I see how it is," Victoria said coldly. "You never got over Isabella. You married me, but your heart remained with your dead wife and her daughter. I was just a convenience, someone to warm your bed and play the part of queen while you mourned your perfect first wife." Edmund was shocked by the venom in her voice. "That's not true. I love you, Victoria. But I also love Elena, and I couldn't let you steal from her." "Steal?" Victoria's voice rose to a near shriek. "I am the queen. Queens don't steal royal jewels, they wear them." "It wasn't a royal jewel," Edmund said wearily. "You know that now." Victoria realized that continuing to argue about the necklace's ownership was pointless. The legal documents were clear, and Edmund had already made his decision. Instead, she focused her anger on what she saw as the deeper betrayal. "You have made it clear where your loyalties lie," she said with icy dignity. "You have chosen your stepdaughter over your wife. You have chosen the past over the future. I hope you're satisfied with your decision." Victoria swept from the room, leaving Edmund alone with his troubled thoughts. He knew his marriage might not survive this crisis, but he also knew he had made the right choice. Elena had deserved justice, and Isabella's memory had deserved respect. Over the next few days, the palace became a battlefield of loyalty and resentment. The servants who had loved Isabella were openly pleased that Elena had reclaimed her mother's necklace. They brought her extra treats and smiled warmly when they saw her wearing the sapphire during private family dinners. The servants loyal to Victoria, however, began to make Elena's life difficult in small ways. Her meals were served late, her laundry was done poorly, and requests for services were forgotten or ignored. They couldn't openly defy her since Edmund had supported her claim, but they could make their disapproval known through petty acts of spite. Victoria herself began a subtle campaign of revenge. She couldn't openly attack Elena without seeming petty and vindictive, but she could make the girl's position in the palace increasingly uncomfortable. She excluded Elena from important social events, claiming the guest lists were already full. She rearranged Elena's apartments, moving her to smaller, less desirable rooms in the north wing under the pretense of renovations. Most cruelly, Victoria began spreading quiet doubts about Elena's character and motives. She suggested to courtiers that the girl was greedy and ungrateful, that she had manipulated her stepfather into supporting her false claims. She painted Elena as a scheming young woman who was trying to destroy the royal marriage out of jealousy and resentment. Elena found herself increasingly isolated. Friends who had once sought her company became distant, uncertain whether associating with her was politically wise. Invitations to social gatherings stopped arriving, and when she attended official functions, people were polite but cool. The situation grew worse when Victoria discovered that Elena had been corresponding with her maternal grandmother about the necklace dispute. Victoria used this as evidence that Elena was plotting against the royal family, sharing private palace business with outsiders who might use the information to embarrass the crown. She's been writing letters to the Dowager Duchess, telling family secrets, and probably planning further attacks on my authority, Victoria told Edmund during one of their increasingly rare private conversations. The Dowager Duchess is Elena's grandmother, Edmund replied. Of course she would write to her about important family matters. Family matters? Victoria laughed harshly. This is about state property and royal protocol. Elena has involved outsiders in crown business, which could be considered treason. Edmund stared at his wife in disbelief. Treason? You're accusing Elena of treason for writing to her grandmother? I'm saying that her actions have consequences, Victoria said coldly. She wanted to play adult games with adult stakes. Now she needs to face adult consequences. Edmund realized that Victoria's resentment had grown into something much more dangerous. She wasn't just angry about the necklace anymore. She was actively trying to destroy Elena's position in the royal family, and possibly even her safety. That evening, Edmund made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He called Elena to his private study and made her an offer that would change her life completely. Elena, I think it would be best if you left the palace for a while, he said gently. Elena's heart sank. Are you sending me away? I'm giving you a choice, Edmund clarified. You can stay here and continue to face Victoria's hostility, or you can go live with your grandmother at Ashford Manor. You would still be welcome at court for important ceremonies, but you would be free from the daily tensions here. Elena considered the offer carefully. The palace had been her home since childhood, but it no longer felt safe or welcoming. Victoria's campaign against her was making life miserable, and Elena was tired of walking on eggshells every day. Would I be able to take Mother's jewelry with me? She asked. Edmund smiled sadly. Of course. The sapphire of Valdoria belongs to you now. All of Isabella's personal jewelry is yours by right. That night, Elena made her decision. She would accept her stepfather's offer and go live with her grandmother. It wasn't the outcome she had hoped for when she first decided to fight for her mother's necklace, but it was perhaps the wisest choice under the circumstances. Lady Margaret was heartbroken when Elena told her about the decision, but she agreed to accompany the princess to Ashford Manor. Your mother would be proud of how you handled this situation, she told Elena as they began packing. You stood up for what was right, even when it was difficult. The news of Elena's departure spread quickly through the palace. Some servants wept openly, knowing they were losing the last connection to their beloved Isabella. Others, loyal to Victoria, were pleased to see the source of tension finally leaving. Edmund found himself deeply saddened by Elena's decision, even though he had suggested it. He loved the girl dearly, and had hoped she could remain part of the royal family without constant conflict. But he also recognized that Victoria's resentment would probably never fade, and Elena deserved to live somewhere she could be happy and respected. Victoria pretended to be indifferent to Elena's departure, but privately she was triumphant. She had successfully driven her rival from the palace and reclaimed her position as the undisputed queen. The necklace was gone, but at least she no longer had to compete with Isabella's daughter for attention and loyalty. On the day of Elena's departure, the contrast in reactions was stark. The older servants lined the corridors to say goodbye, many of them crying openly. The head cook pressed a basket of Elena's favorite pastries into her hands, while the head gardener gave her a bouquet of flowers from Isabella's garden. Victoria was notably absent from the farewell gathering, claiming she had pressing state business to attend to. Edmund, however, was there to see Elena off personally. He embraced her warmly and promised that she would always be welcome in her childhood home. "I'm sorry it came to this," he said quietly. "I'm not," Elena replied, surprising him. "I have my mother's necklace, and I've learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was. Mother would want me to be happy, and I think I'll be happier at Ashford Manor." As Elena's carriage rolled away from Valdoria Palace, she wore the sapphire of Valdoria around her neck. The great blue stone caught the morning light as she looked back at the only home she had ever known. She felt sad to leave, but also free from the weight of palace politics and Victoria's hostility. At Ashford Manor, Elena was welcomed with joy by her grandmother, the Dowager Duchess. The elderly woman had been horrified by the reports of Victoria's behavior and was delighted to have her granddaughter safe under her protection. "Your mother faced similar challenges when she was young," the Dowager Duchess told Elena on her first evening at the manor. "Royal life is never easy for women who have principles and courage. But she always said that integrity was worth more than comfort." Elena settled into life at Ashford Manor with surprising ease. Away from the pressures and intrigues of court, she began to rediscover her own interests and talents. She worked in the gardens, read extensively in her grandmother's library, and began taking a more active role in managing the Ashford estates. Most importantly, she wore her mother's necklace with pride. The sapphire of Valdoria no longer felt like a burden or a source of conflict. It was simply a beautiful reminder of Isabella's love and the strength that Elena had discovered within herself. Back at the palace, the atmosphere gradually returned to normal, but the scars from the conflict remained. Victoria had regained her authority as queen, but her reputation had been damaged by the public dispute. Some courtiers respected her determination to maintain royal dignity, while others saw her as petty and jealous. Edmund found his relationship with Victoria permanently changed. The crisis had revealed aspects of her character that troubled him deeply, and he began to question whether he truly knew the woman he had married. Their conversations became formal and careful, lacking the warmth and intimacy they had once shared. The kingdom itself was divided in its opinions about the affair. Some people admired Elena for standing up for her rights and praised Edmund for supporting justice over convenience. Others felt that Victoria had been unfairly treated and that Elena should have accepted her stepmother's authority without question. 6 months after Elena's departure, an unexpected development changed the situation dramatically. The Dowager Duchess of Ashford died peacefully in her sleep, leaving her entire estate and fortune to Elena. Overnight, the young woman went from being a dependent princess to being one of the wealthiest noble ladies in the kingdom. With her newfound independence and wealth, Elena transformed from a victim of palace politics into a powerful figure in her own right. She used her inheritance to support the same charities that her mother had loved, and she became known throughout the kingdom for her generous philanthropy and wise management of her estates. The sapphire of Valdoria became her signature piece, worn at important social events and charity functions. People began to compare her favorably to her mother, noting the same grace, intelligence, and compassion that had made Isabella so beloved. As the years passed, Elena never returned to live at the palace, but she did maintain cordial relations with Edmund. They corresponded regularly, and she visited for major state occasions. Victoria tolerated these visits with cold politeness, but the two women never reconciled. Elena eventually married a duke from a neighboring kingdom, wearing her mother's sapphire necklace at the wedding. She raised her own daughters to understand the importance of standing up for what is right, even when it's difficult or costly. The story of the Sapphire of Valdoria became legendary throughout the kingdom and beyond. It was told as a tale of courage, justice, and the importance of family honor. Some versions painted Victoria as a villain, while others portrayed her more sympathetically as a woman struggling to establish her own identity in the shadow of a beloved predecessor. Edmund lived to see Elena happily married and successful in her own right, and he took pride in knowing that he had made the right choice during that dramatic evening in the ballroom. His intervention had cost him his marriage and caused a scandal, but it had also ensured that justice was done and that Isabella's daughter received what was rightfully hers. The palace eventually returned to peaceful routines, but those who had witnessed the confrontation never forgot the night when a young princess stood up to a queen, and a king chose justice over political convenience. The Sapphire of Valdoria continued to shine as a symbol of courage, integrity, and the power of standing up for what is right, no matter the cost. In the end, the necklace had been more than just a piece of jewelry. It had been a catalyst that revealed the true character of everyone involved and changed the course of their lives forever. Elena had lost her place in the palace but gained her independence and self-respect. Victoria had kept her title but lost her reputation and marriage. And Edmund had preserved his honor but paid a heavy personal price. The shock that rippled through the palace that night had settled into a new normal, but the lessons learned from the conflict continued to influence the royal family and the kingdom for generations to come. The Sapphire of Valdoria remained where it belonged, with the Ashford family line, and Elena wore it as both a treasured inheritance and a proud symbol of the strength she had found within herself.